Sapphire, how about a VaporX card? How about the 8GB 290X? How about this box is completely full? That's right, the graphics card is inside this box right here. So this is the 8GB version of the 290X from Sapphire. It's got the the Tri-X cooling unit, 3 fans, lots of extra fins, and I'll go ahead and tell you the temperatures right now at full load. We were hitting around 69 degrees, and that is more than 20, maybe even 25 degrees cooler than the stock. Also, as far as the noise goes, this thing is quieter than than even our 970s that are here in the office, so it's extremely quiet, and it has a function built into just the Sapphire. I know I'm getting into the noise before I get into anything else, but that's like one of the coolest things about this. It has a function that allows you to put it in intelligent fan mode, and when it's in intelligent fan mode, only one fan will spin, so it's nice and quiet, and then once you hit about 60 degrees Celsius, the other fans will kick in and keep things nice and cool. So, what's so special about this card? Well, 8GB. Do you need that for gaming? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're going to be playing at 4K, and possibly if you're playing games that require lots of RAM at 1440p. At 1080p, not so much. But the 8GB, frame buffer, or the 8GB buffer just for, while you're doing video editing or productivity, can come in handy, and so that's the main reason we have this card. It's going into Pistol's new rig until the 390X comes out, that is, but it'll be in there, so she can, get her work done with editing. She's also getting into some, fun stuff like Source Filmmaker, and I'm thinking she's probably going to get into some 3D stuff, take after her brother, who knows. Now this has the Tri-X, but this is the VaporX. So what is the VaporX? Well, inside, there's actually a vapor chamber, and it moves the vapor around it. I can get into the science behind it, but it actually, there's actually some vapor inside the chamber, and that moves around to keep things nice and cool. The other thing that's interesting about this card is that the heatsink actually makes contact with the copper in the PCB. Some of the copper in the PCB comes out, makes contact, and that helps to cool the entire inside of the card by a couple of degrees Celsius, which can be a decently big deal. All right, let's get into the specs on this card. So the core clock on this is set at 1030. It's pretty easy to overclock. And there's also multiple different BIOSes and or I guess firmwares they call them on this, but you can press the button on top to switch to the other firmware, so you can try out some different overclocks and that sort of thing. So this is a good card for overclocking, especially once you take into account the cooling and the components used in this, but we'll get to that in just a second. It's a 28 nanometer card, 2816 stream processors, 8GB, 8,192 megabytes to be exact, of GDDR5. That's running at 5500 megahertz effectively. It's a 512-bit card, none of those tiny freaking bit widths of the other cards out there on the market. Now the size on this, it is a pretty decently large card. It's 305 long. I know some cases are only 300 millimeters, but 305 millimeters long, 114 millimeters wide, and 47 high. It's dual slot. Well, actually, it's a big card. It's 2.5 slots. So take that into consideration. Big freaking card. On the top, we have two 8-pin power connectors, and if you don't have enough power connectors from your power supply, you should probably go out and buy a new one, because this thing is going to draw a lot of power. But they do include some Molex. In fact, two Molex to one 8-pin. They include 2 of those in the box. They also include a snazzy mouse pad, and they've even given us an HDMI 1.4A cable. It's 1.8 meters long in the box. Very cool of them to include that. Now let's talk about power consumption, because the thing that, with AMD cards, as soon as someone hears the word AMD, they're like, oh my god, it's going to be as hot as a freaking oven, and it's going to use 9,000 watts power. Well, don't buy stock and then stop using that as your logic out there, because the stock cards are hot. They all use a lot of power. At full load, this thing can use 400 to 420 watts of power. At idle, it's 140 watts, maybe sometimes even lower than that. So idle, not so bad, but at full load, yeah, and you're going to want to make sure that you have a beefy power supply. Now, if you do the math, everyone's like, oh, it's going to cost you a fortune in your power bill. It probably is not going to cost much more than $1 or so per month extra compared to, like a 970 or something like that. If you're gaming a couple hours a day. More than a couple hours a day, maybe a couple bucks extra a month, but less than a cup of coffee a month. And if you're really penny pinching that much, you're probably not going to be looking at this card. So now another thing making this, a premium card is that they're using black diamond chokes and full solid state capacitors. And they've actually got a patent pending choke on here. They say it's 10% cooler and 25% more efficient than like a normal choke. It's kind of hard for me to test that, but that should help you if you're going to be doing some extreme overclocking. Now, as far as monitor support goes, you can power 4 monitors simultaneously with this. You've got one HDMI port, you've got one DisplayPort 1.2, and you have 2 dual-link DVI ports on board. The DisplayPort and the HDMI will support 4K. So I do want to test this against the 970. That'll be in an upcoming video because I want to test a few more games for that video to make sure we get a nice, well-rounded look at these cards. But this has dropped in price. It's now about the same price, maybe sometimes slightly cheaper than a GTX 970 from NVIDIA. So it's a very interesting card, and it can do a lot of different things. Also, if you're just gaming, unless you're gaming at 4K, you probably don't need the 8GB version. If you're gaming at 4K, you will get 6 to 7 to 8 extra FPS at 4K, so that's really cool. But then again, you're talking about a few extra bucks to get the 8GB, and then if you're running 4K, then we're gonna have to start talking about, is this actually powerful enough to run games maxed out at 4K? And that depends on the game you're gonna be playing. So it may not be prime time for 4K just yet. Anyway, let's jump into our benchmarks. We did 1080p and 1440p because we don't have a 4K monitor just yet. So looking at Valley, you can see it did a very good job at both 1440 and 1080. At 1440, it did drop down to 17.8 FPS as far as the minimum goes, but other than that, pretty smooth sailing. So when we take a look at BioShock, 1080 and 1440, both extremely playable. Never dropped below 50 FPS on either one of them, so that's nice. Now we played Lich and Battle Mage, mainly because I didn't feel like loading up Origin to play Crysis, and this is a CryEngine game. 1440p and 1080p, both, again, really, really playable. Just it has no problem with these games. So in Thief, we can play that with Mantle and without Mantle. The first thing I want to do is DirectX. And in DirectX, 1080p and 1440p, again, never drops below 34 frames per second at either resolution. And then you look with Mantle turned on, we got almost an extra 10 FPS at, actually more than 10 FPS at 1440. So Mantle really helps to give you lower level access to the hardware, and the new version of DirectX will be out very soon, and that's going to have similar performance to Mantle in a lot of games, with possibly a slight edge to Mantle, but that could change. Vanishing of Ethan Carter, Unreal Engine game, very, very beautiful, and yeah, anything we throw at this game, it just works really nicely. Take a look at 1080p, never drops below 93 frames per second, and at 1440p, it never drops below 76 frames per second. So that looks nice. The averages are looking good too. All right, Trine 2. I like this game because it's an indie game and it gives us a good baseline. It's not really optimized for anything out there. And in Trine 2, again, we see, I love the performance of this game because the frame times are spot on. You see there's not a lot of variance here. I mean, the average at 1440 is 57, but it never dropped below 56, so it was like the entire time just silky smooth, just playing nicely. That's cool. Next up, Max Payne 3. We turn everything up to the max, except for we do not turn on MSAA. So no MSAA, everything else maxed out, and crazy performance. And this game looks really good too. So I mean, we're talking 141 FPS at 1080p and 116 FPS, actually almost 142 at 1080p. But yeah, just crazy FPS, looking nice. So would I buy this card? Well, of course, I like it for productivity and also for high-res gaming. I like it because it's extremely quiet and it runs nice and cool, especially for an AMD card. And we'll give you some really good numbers on the silence and all that stuff once we get it put into a case. We're going to be putting this into the Be Quiet case that just came out, and I'm expecting it to be really quiet. So we'll give you a full system, profile there with this card and everything else when we build Pistol System. That's coming end of next week. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Be sure to subscribe to our hardware channel. That's this one. That's where all these kind of videos go. And yeah, get to gaming, guys. Let me know what you think. See you next time. You bit with. It's not empty. I promise it's not empty.